Good evening, this is Mr. Wintermelon. So we have learned how humans obtain their nutrients. But how does those nutrients get transported to our cell? This is what we will learn in this chapter of Transport in Humans. So first, let us take a look at the chapter overview. So in Transport of Human or Mammal, there's three main things that we will learn about. So in this video, we will learn about the anatomy of the heart. Then there's also cardiac cycle as well as coronary heart disease, which we will learn in the following video. We have also our blood vessel as well as the blood. So let us start with a quick introduction. As an organism grows, it requires food and oxygen. It also needs to remove waste and carbon dioxide. For unicellular organism, getting food as well as removing waste is rather simple because they can rely on simple diffusion. Simple diffusion works for them because they have high surface area to volume ratio, making the rate of diffusion to be quick, and they are able to maintain a steep concentration gradient. For simple and unicellular organism, simple diffusion as well as osmosis is sufficient. However, for multicellular organism like us, you can see that the molecules doesn't reach the cell in the deeper layer. Thus, complex organisms like us develop a strategy to counter this problem in order for us to access sufficient food as well as oxygen and the removal of our waste. So as you can see, the cell in the inner layer have issue with accessing the oxygen as well as food that are trying to dissolve into the cell. And our strategy to this is to develop a system of channel to supply the cell that are deep in the body. So this system of channel increases the surface area to volume ratio, thus allowing substance to be transported quickly. So you can see there's some gap in between. Those are our blood capillary, and blood capillary will help to supply the food and nutrients as well as to get rid of the waste that our cell produce. And this system is called the circulatory system. And we will start the chapter off by learning the motor that generate the power to pump the blood to the rest of our body. And this is a fancy way of saying our heart. So let us first take a look at the objective of this video. By the end of this video, you should be familiar with the anatomy or the structure of the heart, as well as the function of various features that you can see in our heart. So first, please draw the diagram of a mammalian heart. You can also draw the one that is found in your textbook. Nah, just kidding. So instead of drawing this complicated heart, I would actually recommend, if you do not have any artistic talent, to draw something like this. Basically, there are two smaller rectangles as well as two larger rectangles. Then there are a few thick lines coming in and out. Then you can also see some black line over there. So what do those things represent? An easy way of remembering the structure of the heart will be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So what are 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? 5 vessels. 3 vessels are going in while 2 vessels are going out. Now in actual fact, there's actually 6 vessels, but the other one is just a split from the 2 lungs. So you might as well just take it as 1 because the name is the same. Then we have 4 chambers as well as 3 valves. Again, the valves are the black color line, and obviously there are 4. But again, 2 of them share the same name, so you might as well just take it as 3 valves name that you have to know. 2 caudate tenderni, which is not shown down here. Earlier in this picture, you can actually see the caudate tenderni that is connected to the valves. So, in the middle, there's a median septum. So as I go through the slide, please add in the label of the 5 vessel, 4 chamber, 3 valves, as well as 2 caudate tenderni and 1 median septum, which is just in the middle. You can just label the median septum. Let us start off with the 4 heart chambers. When the blood first enters the heart, it will be through the chamber at the top left hand corner, which is the left atrium. So the left atrium will receive oxygenated blood from the lung, after which the blood will flow into the left ventricle. It is important to take note that the wall of the left ventricle is a lot thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. This is because the left ventricle is responsible for pumping the blood to rest of our body, while the right ventricle is only pumping blood to the lung. So as a result, since it has to generate a larger pressure in order to pump the blood to rest of our body, the wall of the left ventricle is a lot more muscular. So after pumping the blood out and the blood has traveled to the rest of our body, the deoxygenated blood will enter the heart through the right atrium. So it enters the right atrium through the superior as well as inferior vena cava. Both of them are vein. And finally, from the right atrium, the blood will flow into the right ventricle. As mentioned before, the wall of the right ventricle is relatively thinner compared to that of the left because they are only responsible for pumping the blood back into the lung. So after the chamber, let us take a look at the blood vessels supplying blood as well as carrying blood away from the heart. So the blood vessel bringing the oxygenated blood from the lung to the heart is known as the pulmonary veins. So there are actually 2 pulmonary veins, one from the left side of the heart and one from the right side of the heart. So after the blood enters the left atrium and then the left ventricle, it will be pumped out of the heart through the aorta. The aorta is an artery that transports oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the rest of our body. It is thick and muscular to withstand the high pressure generated from the left ventricle. So after the blood has traveled throughout the body, it will return back through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, which are 2 large veins that collect the deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. The superior vena cava will carry deoxygenated blood from above the neck back into the heart, while the inferior vena cava collect the deoxygenated blood from the area of the body that are below the neck. After going through the right atrium, the right ventricle will pump the blood through the pulmonary arteries. Again, it will go out through 1 pulmonary artery before diverging into 2 pulmonary arteries that goes one to the left and one to the right side of the lung. After the blood vessel, let us learn about the name of the valves that can be found in our heart. Technically speaking, 2 of them can be found inside our heart, while the other 2 is actually located in the pulmonary artery as well as the aorta. The set that are found in pulmonary artery and aorta actually shares the same name. So there are actually only 3 names that you have to remember. On the left hand side, we have the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve that separate the left atrium and the left ventricle. The tricuspid valve found on the right hand side separate the right atrium from the right ventricle. So the purpose of the valve is to prevent the backflow of the blood. So when the left ventricle as well as the right ventricle contract, the valve will close and the blood will not flow into the atrium. Instead, they will flow into the aorta or the pulmonary artery. The cardiac tendons that are present will prevent the valve from being pushed into the atrium when the ventricle contract. So the cardiac tendons are something like string that holds the valve to prevent them from getting pushed back into the atrium when the ventricle contract. So there are 2 pairs of semilunar valve and they can be found at the base of the pulmonary artery as well as aorta. Similar to the function of the bicuspid as well as the tricuspid valve, the purpose of the semilunar valve is to prevent the backflow of blood, but this time around is to prevent the backflow of blood into the ventricle. One thing to take note is, since the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve is in between the atrium and ventricle, sometimes the tricuspid valve as well as the bicuspid valve, they are known as the AV, atrium ventricular valve. Now, if you are wondering why they are called bicuspid and tricuspid valve, we can take a view of the heart that is chopped off from the top. So make a smart guess which one is the tricuspid valve and which one is the bicuspid valve. The tricuspid valve is the one that is separated into 3, while the bicuspid valve is the one that is separated into 2. One is bi, one is tri. And finally, the median septum that sits right in the middle of the left and right ventricle is a muscular wall that prevents the oxygenated blood from mixing with the deoxygenated blood. So we can take a look at the overall structure of the heart. Hopefully, you will be able to identify the atrium, the ventricle, the aorta, the pulmonary artery, the pulmonary vein, the superior and inferior vena cava, as well as the cardiac tendons and the medium septum. I think you can also see the semilunar valve as well as the AV valve in the diagram. Finally, let us look at some features of our heart as well as what is the functions of those features. As mentioned, the median septum helps to separate the oxygenated from the deoxygenated blood, preventing them from mixing. The presence of the AV valves or the bicuspid and tricuspid valve as well as the semilunar valve will prevent the backflow of blood, ensuring that the blood only flows in one direction. Say, is one direction dead already? Anyhow, the wall of the left ventricle is also more muscular than the wall of the right ventricle. And the purpose is because the left ventricle needs to deliver the blood to the rest of our body, which is why the wall of the left ventricle is more muscular. The presence of cardiac tendons also prevents the valve from being pushed into the atrium. So this is all for the anatomy of the heart as well as some of the special features in the heart. Tune in next time where we will learn about the cardiac cycle.